The mythical 12 hours guitar workout. We've all heard about our favorite guitar players talk about how when they started out, they would play all day, every day. And I certainly talked about it myself. Those stories are all true, you know, falling asleep on your guitar and forgetting to eat and drink and getting your parents worried that you will never re-emerge from the basement. And there's a certain romanticism about this kind of devotion to the instrument. Certainly a very small percentage of guitar players are willing and or able to submit themselves to this kind of discipline. And when I did it, I fell into many pitfalls. I made some mistakes because my practice was a bit disorderly at the time, simply from lack of information. You know, it was in 2022 when I started. And at the same time, I will try now, with the benefit of hindsight, to tell you what I would do with these 12 hours. And certainly you don't need to play 12 hours. You can apply this to your own practice, however long it is. If it's 1 hour or 2 hours, you can still get a lot out of this video. And besides, it's going to be a lot of fun revisiting those times. Usually we spend just a few minutes warming up before I practice, and let's assume you're breaking it up into 3 sessions, so morning, afternoon and evening, so let's call it about 30 minutes total. For guitar stuff, I would do a lot of those little chromatic things, some very simple string skipping, maybe some chordal work, you know, very easy, take it easy and slow. And away from the guitar, I would just do some rotations, maybe like this, some very light stretches, like that, you know, very simple stuff. This video is not about what to do in each step, but I will give you a few ideas. Then I would just jump right in with scales and arpeggios. If we can all agree that we should know our scales and arpeggios, then we already know what we have to practice, and we accept that it's going to take us a long time to get there. But what I will start with is certainly the major and minor scales. Then I will go to the pentatonics and the blues scale. With that out of the way, then I would get into the modes, certainly the melodic and harmonic minor scales with their own modes, and then expand with symmetrical scales, you know, whole tone and diminished. Then I would do probably some world scales that I enjoy, maybe the bebop scales, and it really depends on the style of music. Maybe make up your own scales, that's a great exercise too. So you can go way deep, and it's even deeper if you think about all these scales having 12 possible keys, and many systems by which to play them on the whole fretboard. So you might start with the cage system, which is simpler, and then maybe play the 3 notes per string scale thing, and then 4 notes per string, then play them in octaves, and then play them, one of my favorites, courtesy of the great Mick Goodrick, on only 1 string, on pairs of strings, 3 strings, and so on. It never ends, but it's certainly extremely useful. And I said 1 hour for this section, but sometimes you will need to probably stretch a bit more, maybe 2 or maybe even more. You can never know enough chords, so go and get yourself a couple of good chord books. In my case, it was Joe Pass Chords and Ted Green's Chord Chemistry, and get to work. I would start with major, minor, diminished, and power chords to get you going. All this, of course, has to be learned in at least 4 or 5 fingerings per key, so that's already quite a lot. And then as soon as you can, move up to the 7th chord, very useful, and then the 6th, 9s, 11s, 13 chords, sus chords, very important. And after that, if you're into it, go into altered chords, slash chords, and the more complicated stuff. But you know, it's a lot of information, and it's hard sometimes to retain because there's so many fingerings that sometimes you don't use for a while. So chord is something you really always have to be refreshing, but very useful. Technique is where guitar players spend a lot of their time, and it is important. But if you practice well, and I've taught you how before, here's a link for you, you will be able to use the previous sections also to improve your techniques. But here specifically we're talking about alternate picking and sweep picking, legato, tapping, you know, technical stuff. And we're focusing on precision and the speed and all the beautiful stuff, right? So let's say 30 minutes per technique, and this will give you a couple of hours. Again, when I was playing, I might have spent 5 or 6 or 7 hours doing technique, but I don't think you need as much if you practice well. Music theory was a mystery to me when I started out, basically because of lack of information. You know, there was no internet, and my friends who went to music lessons kept it very secret, and all I had was this incomprehensible book that my loving parents bought for me, and I couldn't make heads or tails of it. So, you know, I let it slide for many years, and then I really had to play catch up, and it was intense. So if you can start early with it, I think you'll have a great advantage. And as far as what you study, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff, you know, chordal theory, scalar theory, fretboard knowledge, musical theory in general. You can study compositional theory like Schoenberg and Persichetti and all those books. There's many things you can learn. It really depends also on the style of music you play and where you're at. Sometimes you're just not ready to go too deep. So to get you started, what I would do is certainly 3 pillars of theory that I like to call. These are the 3 things that I suggest everybody learns. One of them is the circle of fifths. Learn the circle of fifths inside out. Then you should learn all the intervals. So basically the interval table, you should know that. And then finally, all the notes on the fretboard like that. You should be able to name them all in your sleep. And this will really get you going. After that, it's a huge field and it's incredibly fun and interesting, so I leave it up to you. Also, basic music reading and writing will be a big plus. Ear training is another thing I waited too long to get into and then had to work extra hard to make up for it. Ear training is such a huge deal that I would spend 12 hours a day on it. But the truth is that after 30 minutes, your ear tires, you know, it tires very quickly, and then you really start seeing diminishing returns. So 30 minutes is enough, and I would focus on relative pitch, meaning you should know, starting from any note, what every other note will sound like, ascending and descending. You can start by very simply learning the intervals, so what a fifth sounds like, what a third sounds like, and so on. Then you can expand a bit with the basic arpeggios, so major, minor, diminished, augmented. Then maybe move on to some chords, then try singing scales, always ascending and descending. That's very important. And eventually you'll be able to predict and imagine a sound without having to play it. So you will place your ear before your fingers, which is kind of the whole point of being an artist. So ear training is a must. Don't let it slide. Learning songs and solos can be a very important part of learning how to play. After all great painters have been inspired by studying the masters, right? At the same time, you don't want to get stuck on it. You know, there's enough covers of Back in Black, we don't need anymore, and we're actually way more interested in what you are going to do with the knowledge you have and the technique you have. I have to say, though, that studying a Brian May solo and seeing how his head worked when he harmonized all those guitars, or studying a Mozart piece and getting into his head, you know, it's very exciting and very inspiring. So I would say give some time to this, but don't get too much into it that you forget who you are musically. Now this to me is much more interesting than the previous one, and I've done a lot of it, figuring out songs by Queen, AC/DC, Rainbow, Prince, and hundreds of others. Opened my eyes to so many concepts of music, like what is a verse, what is a chorus, do I need an intro and a bridge, do I need an outro, is the intro the same as the chorus, just arranged differently, and how many times can I repeat the verse, and how can I keep a melody interesting throughout a song, and so on and so on. It never ends. And learning from the best is one of the greatest things you can do. You don't even need to play the songs on the guitar, as long as you're conscious of, you know, structure, like how many times is the verse happening, maybe some kind of melodic relativity, right? If my verse is in this key, is the chorus in the same key? Is it going up, down, you know, basic stuff. But really, all you have to do is simply listen to music, which you've been doing for many years anyway. Just now, you're putting all that information in storage so you can go back to it whenever you need it. Improvisation is one of my favorite things in the whole world, and it could be 1 hour or it could also be 5 hours, you know. But the idea here is that you become free from any rule, from any boundary, and you just simply explore your musicality, your inspiration, your skills and your lack of skills. You work around anything you have, and that's all you do. You make music. Now, you can do it 100% freely, but it's also very useful to, for example, if I studied this technique today and that scale, let me just try to put them together and be musical with them. So it's not a bad thing to maybe focus on 1 or 2 things every time you improvise, but save some time for simply boundless creativity too. Out of all things in music, composition is my #1 favorite thing, even though it can be extremely maddening sometimes. But the high you get when you get this idea that you can't shake, and then you work on it and you bring it into the real world from who knows where, that to me is an incredible feeling, and I suggest you start doing it. You don't need much, whatever you know. If you know 2 chords, you know how many great songs were written with 2 chords, so there's no excuses. get to composing music. In time, for example, for myself, maybe I used to spend 10 or 12 hours practicing. Now is probably 80% of my time with an instrument is composition. There's nothing that beats it for me. I hope I'm bringing the point home, and I hope that I can inspire you to just pick up a guitar or whatever instrument you want and put some music down and record it. It's important on another level, because if you don't do it, then you'll just be collecting skills, and that's not making music. You know, nobody cares about that. Just whatever you have, use it to make music. That's kind of the whole point of why we want to practice 12 hours a day. When I first started playing the guitar, it was all about the 2 tape decks. So you would record yourself on one of these, then play it back as you played along to it, and record it onto another one, and then bounce it back and forth a few times. Before long, you wouldn't be able to hear anything because of tape degradation. But then we moved up to the 4-track Tascam cassette decks, and now this big studio. It doesn't really matter what gear you have, but we want to immortalize our art, and you should be able to do it. It's very important to you, and also a lot of times for other people. So I suggest every day you spend just a bit of time getting to know your gear, whatever gear it is. Maybe it's just a laptop or an iPad, maybe you have a studio, whatever it is. You know, learn how to work it, how to use it, get some good sounds out of your guitar and your amps, and that way we can all enjoy your art as well. And there you have it, my suggestions for your 12-hour workout. Now, I understand this is all in good fun, and a lot of you will never be able to practice 12 hours a day, and a lot of you don't even want to, you know, and that's fine. But if you understand how intertwined and interrelated and how foundational these subjects are, then you'll be able to kind of fit it into your own schedule and work on it at your own pace. And if you're one of the strange ones who want to spend your whole day with a guitar, then this will do it. I can promise you that if you follow this pattern and this workout, it will get you there. All right, another thing is that when you start out, you might be focused on technique and speed and amassing knowledge, but then as you achieve all that, your interests will shift. For some of us, it's composition and performance. For others, it might be teaching or maybe production. You know, the important thing is you have this solid foundation to build upon, and that's all I'm here for. You know, I give you the tools, and you do whatever it is you want with them. Thank you very much for being there. If you enjoyed this video, maybe give it a like. If you haven't joined us yet, please subscribe. And as always, I look forward to reading all your comments about your current routine and what other practice routines you've used. And if you want to give this one a try, I really look forward to reading about your results. All right, as always, thanks again, and I will see you very, very soon.